So making a new video here. The topic of discussion is in regards to the issues I have with my mom. I mean, I've made it clear on the channel, made it clear in what I'm saying, that, she, like traveling to those places, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Peru, like, don't get me wrong, she can travel there, she can travel, you have the right, mobility, it's a United Nations charter right. However, obviously, these things get out of hand, and she, she made a poor choice because, then the people start coming here, and, we could barely help the people that are already here in Canada. Offering free housing, I said something very important in terms of, like, knowing what to say, not what to say, when to say it, and knowing these things in advance, and telling people what they want to hear. The tone you use, and mannerisms, and you could change the way you sound. You could change the pitch of your voice. Who says it. I don't know, like, you could be sly, you can try to come off a certain way and emotionally appeal to emotion, but that's not, I again, because the world shouldn't be biased per se, but like, and I said it in the video, so I guess, I'm just kind of being redundant, really. Like, I think I've said everything I had to say. A lot of this stuff becomes binary at some point, it's just, you put in your hours, you clock out, and then repeat. Obviously, keeping the ball rolling in terms of your life, you need to have a reason. You have to look at, your life, your experiences, and evaluate, what is worth it or not. I personally had to question whether, college is worth it, whether or not, Canada is a nice place, worth it to, continue, partaking in the system, because it doesn't give anything back. That being said, again, like, I know my flaws, I know what I've done, wrong, and it's probably everything, but, it all goes back to, what's natural and artificial, and I think to some extent, unfortunately, Canada, it's built artificially. It doesn't naturally exist. That, there's like heating. It's not exactly natural. It's more artificial, only because it's more artificial because the heat, it's not, negative 35 and then 35 degrees Celsius. And those are drastic weather changes that, aren't very, like, suitable for human conditioning. It's not a nice place, nice way to live. I, for one, like, I don't hold a judgment past it. The thing is, like, you could delude yourself, tell yourself fairy tales, and cope with life, and that's to some extent what everybody does. And I already said, you snooze, you lose culture. Dying alone. A lot of people are dying alone in a corner, like, in mass hysteria, and, trampling, and this means of dying, and just the truth of life, that, like, the truth of life, the fact of the matter, unfortunately, is that the truth is unfortunate that, like, it's just what it is. It's just what it is. Like the artificiality, like, as well as, like, just the way real life occurs, where, just like, it's just dumb ways to die. I mean, yeah, obviously some of these deaths are intentional. There was a plot, there was, a premeditation to the homicide, or there was some tragic flaw. And with the way the world is, you ask yourself if having emotions is worth it, right? Because unfortunately it just seems as though that, the emotions aren't worth it. That, in the long run, the emotions get in the way, and everybody's soliciting this one, innate human desire. And unfortunately, for some reason, everything seems to, like, boil down to that. And in an uncreative sense, that's what it is. And you could delay that. You can, like, delay things. You could they call it not anticlimactic, but, like, you could stall, these tragic events, and, like, not gonna put names in these videos, but you could forestall events and things like that. And it's difficult because, like, I don't know, like, the longer you live, the less meaningful life appears, like real life. And it's hard because you're betting on, your biological, your existence, versus, the hard facts of real life, the hard truth, the harsh, the physics, and the physics that, entails the reality, the physical makeup of the reality, of what it is. And that's really it, and what to say, what not to say, how to say it, when to say it, and it's like you have to know these things in advance, and soliciting this one desire, and the conflict that it induces. It's not even dogma, right? I'm talking about this one thing that, at least in the modern world. And so it's very harsh, because it's like, people wonder, why can't people just hold hands and make peace, and everybody get along, and, like, like the waving flag, by Canaan video, with the World Cup, and there's many explanations why, but when you look at the World Cup, for example, like, it's going to be hosted again, and I don't know who's watching. I don't know who is, like, starting these events, and psychologically, it is about these events, because, you sign off on these events, you decide to partake in them, you sign off on events, you partake in them, and it's like this need for competition, or the competition that you participate in. And then some might argue if it's, the reptilian part of the brain, and then others argue that, this is the only thing that gives them meaning or purpose in life, which is a disturbing fact, because it's like, the real world, unfortunately, isn't scripted. Like, I don't have a script to say these things in this video, and maybe I have a bit more emotions right now than I typically do, and I shouldn't. I would remove the emotions at all. I would avoid putting myself in confrontation. Like, I would buy a hijab, or the face mask I was gonna buy, all for the sake of, just not being identified, and just, going back to, like, square one of the problem, so see, unfortunately, real life is like this. It's tragic, uh like, obviously everybody makes do with what they have. They try their best. um and that's the thing, that's the whole issue. It's like when people try to develop a culture, like a culture, right? Like, like they call it like a Mississippian culture, or Minoan culture, or just you name a culture. And when the people try to develop it, like in the modern world, every culture is fighting a massive uphill battle because you have all the other cultures. And the dogma, really, it could be a fight over attention to your favorite celebrity, and then it all just depends if it escalates from there. There's like a 15-minute 10-second rule, where if the person can't control themselves after those 10 seconds, like their impulse to to fight, or to get upset, then that's the impulse control that people have for anything. It could be like a sexual impulse control, and sexual assault thing. It could be an assault, like a physical assault. And I don't know what to say, because it's like we're created to not control some impulses, that and like I was born without a tooth, so it's like I haven't developed fully in terms of the physically and my brain, to even process like a humiliation, or the emotional like concept of what was happening there, the tragedy, right? And it seems as though like this tragedy is like, it's like these Romeo and Juliet things that play out repeatedly. You can almost predict that it's gonna happen, and I hate to say that. I don't believe in a binary world. I don't believe in a world of zeros and ones, but this is what you do. This is what you do. Like the computer games I played are like, they're psychologically destroying. Like they psychologically they destroy you. They aren't natural. It's not like a natural, because like you have this like, so when I say cultures, right? So you develop a culture. There's storytelling cultures, and they tell stories to each other, and then they they tell stories like like a storytelling culture. And then that's pretty much the human situation, at least I think. I think what ends up happening is, you have, I guess, I don't tell these creation myths, and at this point, it's not even worth it to put these to test, or to fable one culture against another, and trying to argue for whatever you want to argue for, whatever god or thing you're arguing for. But like it's faceless, because it's like it's just what you believe against what they believe. And then you could use logic, use syllogisms, you could use personal experience, and when you enter a public space, right, you don't know who you're going to see and what they even are, what in essence they are, if they're an entity, if they're like a person. And like masturbating, or my choices, right, they only unfortunately solidify a horrifying, disgusting truth. And I mean, I'm sure everybody deals with this, right? The fact that real life isn't a Disney movie, the fact that real life isn't something we can predict or control. And it's horrible, because once you enter like a feel-good delusion for like a second, you never want it to end. It's like a drug. So am I basically saying that we're all screwed? I don't know. I don't know, I don't know how far we would keep going like this, right? The answer isn't, easy to find, because it's like asking about the future. I didn't start off this way either, in the beginning, and to me, honestly, at this point, the way I see Canada, or just, people in general, it's like we're corrupting the original human being. Every immigrant comes here like, and they're pure and they're good and like they're an honest character, right? And then they come here and then everything, corrupts them, like and it corrupts them. It's like at this point you're just corrupting a human being. You're not even corrupting like a different race or something. You're just corrupting a human being. I mean before the Europeans sailed across the ocean, but and of course we have to ask what pushed them to do that, and what happens in our society today that pushed us to this point. Because it seems as though like the closest to a decent life you'll get is in this manner where you manually do all these things yourself, with no guarantee of the next thing. It's a horrifying, it's an existential thing that you just. So yeah, you have like these cultures that develop. You could talk to people, try to make the friend, and be like, oh yeah, I'll develop a culture through there. Try to build a friendship that's authentic, authentic to you and the people around you. But then again, it's like the conflict that is solicited. What, like what what's soliciting you to create the friendship? It's there's just there's no logic. There's no logic, and that's why there's a problem with all this. And that's the whole issue, That's why the Jews call the average person a goyim, right? Like it's got everything to do with being conscious and then making mistakes, right? Once you gain the consciousness, you're eligible to these mistakes, and you are a goy for the simple fact that that you're doing this, first time. Your first time, you had to figure all these things out. And like you wouldn't even get in a car or on an airplane, right? If you knew, the Goya tree, we'll call it, that went into that, because the people there